Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. As you know, there's a growing concern over the foreign purchase of our farmland, especially by Chinese Communist Party. And I was wondering if you could tell us what the USDA is currently doing to enforce the Agriculture Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, and what you're doing to investigate foreign purchases that have not been reported.
We have doubled the number of people focused on implementation of the current law. But Congresswoman, here's the challenge. The challenge is we do not have any investigative power. We don't have that power. We have essentially the ability to penalize, to assess penalties, but we don't have the capacity to investigate. You're looking at more than 3,000 counties in this country. Every single county has a recorder's office. Every single recorder's office receives deeds. There isn't a process now for there to be a accumulation of the deeds that are being filed today in those recorder's offices. It is dependent on people making the report to us voluntarily. So it's a system where there's a gap in terms of our ability to know what transactions are taking place.
Well, it's too bad that we've let this go on so long and not sought to rectify it.
It's a more when you think about rectifying it, basically what you'd have to have is you'd have to have a clearinghouse where information would be filed on every real estate transaction in the country, okay, so that clearinghouse could then be looked at. Now, I mean, you just think about that, whether people really are.
Yes, which is why that's why I have a bill to stop foreign purchases of farmland until we can get this in place and figure out, number one, how much land is owned already by foreign.
It's about 40 million acres.
And foreign adversary, China, and how we're going to enforce the disclosure of those purchases. Secretary, on March 2nd, I sent you a letter outlining concerns with Brazil's beef imports after they were late to report an atypical case of BSE. Given Brazil's repeated history of failing to report diseases and failing to meet international standards, what steps are you taking to ensure beef from Brazil does not pose a risk to U.S. consumers?
We continue to provide significant surveillance at the border to make sure that whatever's coming in from this country is safe. I would say that you have to be very careful about atypical cases because we've had atypical cases here in the U.S., and so we have to be very careful about bans on exports because.
Yes, well, I wasn't talking about bans.
Okay.
It was the fact that they didn't report it. I mean, I understand that we have that also.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a situation, an issue where the WTO is basically, advised. We always express concern. We're going to obviously continue, and we have expressed concern about the lateness of it, but we want to make sure that you know that we are making sure that we're doing extra vigilance at the border. Not
Great.
just for Brazil, but also, as I mentioned earlier, African swine fever. That's a really significant issue.
Thank you so much. And my constituents are concerned with Mexico's import ban of GM corn from the U.S. I was happy to hear that the U.S. Trade Representative requested technical consultations earlier this month. Can you talk more about what happens after the technical consultations and if the USDA would encourage the White House to bring a dispute?
Well, I've been very clear about this. We're going to take this as far as it needs to go to be able to reverse the decree that Mexico has in place today.
Good, thank you. Illinois corn farmers appreciate that. And one last question. The EPA continues to create this overburdensome regulation for farmers as it relates to pesticides. So what is your message towards the EPA, the message of the USDA towards the EPA when it comes to overregulation of crop protection tools?
We have a division within USDA that basically provides information to EPA on any proposal that they have relative to crop inputs to make sure that they understand and appreciate the impact and effect that a particular course of action might be on producers and on production.
If you find that they're overburdensome, do you follow up with them?
Well, basically, our job isn't necessarily to tell the EPA exactly what they're supposed to do, because I don't want them telling me what to do. My job is to basically provide them the information as best we can in terms of the impact And then whatever decision they make, it's our job to try to provide resources so farmers can comply with whatever the regulation is.
I'm sure you're very influential with them, and the overburdensome regulations are a great burden on the farmers. Thank you so much.
General Lady's time has expired.